G'day guys, welcome to episode 115 of Ask Jack D. Today I take a question that's a follow-on from the monthly founders address I do with my team here at the Entourage around how will our education philosophies ultimately permeate throughout education, and what do I believe needs to happen to education globally and through all the different systems of education to enhance its effectiveness for building and developing effective human beings.
28 and I'm trying to shape history, pulling from the sky for some strength to take with me. Line up the stars, fly away quickly and push the world forward like a tidal wave hit me. Yeah. I ride the wave swiftly, I fear no man. Check my titles, mate, quickly.
G'day guys, welcome to episode 115 of Ask Jack D, and thank you for tuning in. Once a month, I spend about 60 to 90 minutes, usually 90 minutes, usually longer than 90 minutes, with my team doing what we call a founder's address. So we get everybody together in couches and beanbags and all sorts of stuff, and I spend an hour and a half with them, usually more, on pretty much anything, right? Like it might be what I've been learning about in the previous month, it might be what I'm working on, it might be vision, mission, value stuff with regards to the Entourage, it might be a particular play or a particular strategy that needs to be communicated to them, but it's 90 minutes where I just get to be with the whole team once a month, and it's like my favorite time, favorite thing that's scheduled into my calendar really, because it's when I get to connect with and communicate with and try and help enable everybody that I care so much about. Beck O'Brien is one of the absolute superstars that we have here at the Entourage. I could talk about her forever, I won't, other than to say she's an amazing human being who has been on one of the most profound and steep growth journeys, both personally and professionally, I've seen ever, and she's done that in the last year. She's now a leader in our business, she's like 22 years of age, and she's just incredible. Anyway, she submitted this question. Hey Jackie D, ever since our last founders address, I've been pondering about the education system. I want to ask you a question for next Ask Jack. How do you think your principles of education are going to transform the education system at large? For example, how would you apply what we do at the Entourage to primary school learning? Much love, Becky O. Much love straight back to you, Becky O. Okay, cool. So this is a really good question because often people ask me, Jack, don't you think if you want to change the education system, which we do, don't you think you should be starting with like prep or kindergarten or primary school or whatever, because then you get to influence students younger? And my thinking around that is this. What happens in higher education, this is why we started in higher education, what happens in higher education guides and governs everything that happens at every other layer of education, because from kindergarten to primary school to high school is all geared and engineered and built to maximize university and higher education enrollment. So if you change the game here, by virtue of the shift in that needle, the rest of the river, if you like, upstream, shifts with it to move to what the new standards and principles and practices are. So that's why we start, that's why I've chosen to start at higher education. Having said that, we do have, I started the Entourage Foundation last year. We haven't operationalized that yet, but that will work at a high school level. It's not-for-profit type business, and that'll do really meaningful things at a high school level, and eventually we'll get to primary. So we will do all that, but we're starting with higher ed because it is such an influential factor in the education system at large. The principles that we apply at higher ed, so when we say we want to change the education system, what I mean by that is it's similar to what like technology was like 20 or 30 years ago, right? Education in many senses is clunky, it's like highly professional, it's not very intuitive, and in more recently, say the last 10 years, it's even become a lot less effective, right? 53% of people that come out of university are unemployed or underemployed, meaning they don't have a job, or they do, but they don't require the degree that they've just spent years and perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars attaining. They don't need to have that degree in order to have the job that they're working, right? Unfortunately, particularly around Sydney, you see a lot of people driving taxis that hold MBAs, and there's nothing wrong with driving taxis, but that's not why you go and get an MBA. And so we want to make education more intuitive. We want to put the student back in the center of the experience, because if in researching and studying education, what one can identify relatively easily and quickly is that there is very little regard given to what is the student learning and how useful is this going to be for their career, meaning what are they learning and does the world need it, right? give you an example of that, in 2012, Harvard did $4 billion in revenue. That year they spent $0 on making teaching better. I only use 2012 because at that point one of their professors, a guy called Professor Clayton Christensen, spoke to the allocations committee in Utah, a particular board, videos on YouTube, and he said, you know, higher education is now open for disruption because at Harvard we did $4 billion this year and we spent $0 on making teaching better. I'm not using that example because it's specific to Harvard in 2012. It's just that it was the year that Clayton spoke to that particular board. So that's indicative of like Harvard's the most respected education institution in the world. That's indicative of all the education institutions. And often the more prestigious they are, the more guilty they are of that. And often the KPIs around content and curriculum, if a traditional education institution releases a piece of content for curriculum, they have KPIs about how long that piece of curriculum can stay in play for. So they measure the ROI of each piece of curriculum, right? So if we do a bit of, you know, you put a unit in a diploma of business or a bachelor's degree of business, and there's a unit here around marketing. The faculty are judged by how long they can keep that curriculum in play, not by is it still relevant, is it still current, is it cutting edge, is it world class. It doesn't matter. How long can we keep that in place so we don't have to develop new content, right? So at a systemic level, the system is challenged. The principles that we apply at a higher ed level, putting the students at the center of the experience. We focus on what's being learned. Notice I didn't say focus on what's being taught. We focus on what's being learned. And thirdly, we focus on student outcomes, meaning employability, or if they want to go and start their own business, to what degree do they start and build a successful business, and what personal growth do they discover and grow into throughout the program, right? So employability, ability to start or build a business, and personal growth throughout, and are they getting it, right? We want to bring an element of intuition back to education, whereby an intuition in two senses. Firstly, in the sense that it speaks to the heart and soul of the individual, and secondly, in the sense that it's an intuitive process. So you come into a program no different to turning on one of these things. These things, I don't think they come with instruction manuals, right? Because they don't need to. Because you turn it on, you go swipe to unlock, you do your thing, and then you just know what to do. That's why 2-year-olds pick up smartphones and they know how to drive them. Education should be the same. Education should just be an extension of oneself, and you can essentially follow your own interests and your own passions through adaptive learning and artificial intelligence and everything else to make education a beautiful, enjoying, enriching process. And so if we can achieve that in higher ed over the next, say, 5 years, that will have a flow-on effect throughout all levels of education, and through foundational work and not-for-profit work will also be driving it in those sectors as well. So, Becky, really, really good question. Question for you guys in the comments below. What do you believe the number one deficiency is with the current education system? Could be primary school, could be high school, could be higher ed, doesn't matter. What do you think the number one flaw in the traditional education system is? This will be a very interesting conversation. Some people might think it's perfect. If you think it's perfect, say it's perfect. I'm more than happy for you to have that view. But what do you think the number one need for improvement is? In the comments below, answer that question now. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.